A freezing boy knocks on a millionaire's door, begging for warmth. But when the man sees his face, his world shatters. What shocking secret ties them together? The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying sharp flakes of snow that stung 12-year-old Landon's face. His thin jacket did little to protect him from the bitter cold. His fingers, numb and stiff, clutched the fabric tighter against his chest as he walked, his breath coming in ragged, white puffs. His stomach ached from hunger, but the cold overshadowed even that. He had been wandering for hours, hoping to find shelter. The city was a maze of glowing windows, warm and inviting, but none of those homes were for him. He wasn't welcome anywhere. His mother was gone, and he had no one. His steps slowed as he reached the wealthier side of town. The houses here were grand, their roofs steeped in soft golden light, the driveways lined with luxury cars. Beyond the towering iron gates, families gathered around fireplaces, safe from the cruel winter. Landon hesitated in front of one particular mansion. It wasn't the biggest house on the block, nor the brightest. In fact, something about it seemed colder than the others. The windows were dimly lit, and the massive oak door looked heavy and unwelcoming. But something about it pulled him in. His hands trembled as he raised a fist and knocked. At first, nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. His breath caught in his throat as he waited. A sound echoed from inside, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. A tall man stood before him, dressed in a dark robe, his sharp features twisted in irritation. His graying hair was neatly combed back, his expression one of annoyance rather than concern. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Landon, scrutinizing him. "What do you want?" the man asked, his voice deep and sharp like the wind outside. Landon swallowed, his throat dry. His instincts told him to run, but his body refused to move. "Please, sir," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm freezing." The man exhaled, his breath visible in the cold air. He was about to close the door, but something made him stop. His eyes narrowed as he examined Landon more closely. There was something familiar about him. Something unsettling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cold pressed in, but it was nothing compared to the heavy silence that had fallen between them. Finally, the man stepped aside. "Come in," he said. Landon hesitated only for a second before stepping into the warmth. He had no idea that this night would change his life forever. The warmth of the house hit Landon like a wave, making his frozen skin tingle painfully as he stepped inside. He shivered, his body trying to adjust to the sudden change in temperature. The grand foyer was dimly lit, the air filled with the faint scent of polished wood and expensive cologne. His eyes darted around, taking in the towering staircase, the heavy velvet curtains, and the enormous chandelier above. The man who had let him in closed the door with a quiet but firm click. Landon turned to face him, his breath still uneven. "I'll give you food, but you're not staying," the man said, his tone flat. His face was unreadable, his piercing blue eyes studying Landon as if trying to place him. Landon nodded quickly. He hadn't expected kindness, but he wasn't in a position to argue. His stomach twisted with hunger, and even just a few minutes out of the cold was a blessing. The man gestured for him to follow. His robe trailed behind him as he moved through the wide hallway, his steps slow but confident. Landon followed hesitantly, his worn-out shoes making barely a sound on the marble floor. They entered a spacious kitchen, far too elegant for something as simple as making food. It was the kind of kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine rather than in a real home. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under the warm lights, and the long granite countertops were spotless. The man opened a cabinet, retrieving a can of soup. The click of the can opener breaking the seal made Landon's mouth water. He hadn't had a hot meal in days. As the man poured the soup into a small pot and placed it on the stove, Landon hesitated before speaking. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to face him, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. His gaze was sharp, unreadable. "Where are your parents?" he asked finally. Landon shifted uncomfortably, looking down at his hands. He never liked talking about it. "My mom, she passed away," he murmured. The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "And your father?" Landon shook his head. "I never knew him." The man's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "What was your mother's name?" Landon hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ellie Barlow." The spoon in the man's hand clattered against the countertop. His face, so carefully composed before, went pale. Landon flinched at the sudden movement, unsure of what had just happened. He could feel a change in the air, thick with something unspoken. The man's fingers curled into fists before he quickly relaxed them, turning away from Landon. His back straightened, his shoulders tense. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a voice quieter than before, he asked. "How old are you?" 12, Landon answered. The man inhaled sharply, as if he had just been punched in the gut. His grip on the countertop tightened. Landon watched him, confusion creeping in. Why was this man reacting so strangely? The soup on the stove bubbled softly, but neither of them moved. The silence stretched between them, heavy and filled with something Landon didn't understand. But the man did. Because in that moment, Clinton Barlow realized the boy standing in front of him wasn't just any lost child. He was his son. Landon watched the man's face shift, his once calm expression now unreadable. Something had changed. The tension in the room was thick, like the air before a storm. The only sound was the bubbling soup on the stove, but Clinton Barlow didn't move to stir it. His hands gripped the counter, knuckles white. Landon shifted uncomfortably. He had spent years learning how to read people, knowing when to run, when to stay silent. And right now, something about this man's reaction made his skin prickle with unease. "Sir?" he asked cautiously. Clinton finally turned back to him, but his eyes weren't as sharp as before. There was something else now, something deeper, like recognition. But that didn't make sense. "You said your mother's name was Ellie Barlow?" Clinton asked, his voice quieter than before. Landon nodded. That was her maiden name. The silence stretched between them. Clinton exhaled slowly, rubbing his hand over his face as if trying to wake from a dream. He looked at Landon again, his gaze flickering over his features, his dark hair, his sharp cheekbones, his blue eyes. Those eyes. His breath caught. He had seen them before. Not just anywhere, in a woman he had once loved. Clinton swallowed hard, his pulse hammering in his ears. Ellie. It had been over 12 years since he last saw her. Back then, he had been a different man, ambitious, driven, unwilling to let anything hold him back. They had been young, struggling, trying to build a future. But when the opportunity came for him to expand his business, he had made his choice. Ellie had begged him to stay, to slow down. She had wanted a family, a future together, but Clinton had been blinded by his hunger for success. And so he had left. She had never reached out to him again. And he, selfish and stubborn, had never tried to find her. Until now. Until this moment, when a boy with her last name in his eyes stood in his kitchen, shivering from the cold. Landon noticed the way the man was looking at him now, like he had seen a ghost. Do you know my mom?" Landon asked, his voice hesitant. Clinton swallowed the lump in his throat. "I did," he said finally. Landon's eyes lit up, but then suspicion clouded them. "What happened between you two?" Clinton didn't answer right away. His fingers curled into his palms. How could he explain to this boy, the boy who might be his son, that he had abandoned the woman who loved him? That he had chosen money over family? His chest tightened. Landon took a small step forward. His breath was uneven now, as if he was afraid of the answer. Were you close?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Clinton inhaled sharply. He could see it now, the truth was coming, whether he was ready or not. "Landon," he started, his voice strained, "did your mother ever tell you anything about your father?" Landon stiffened. His whole body tensed as if preparing for a blow. "No," he said, his voice hollow. "She never talked about him." A wave of guilt crashed over Clinton. Landon clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. "Why?" he asked, his voice laced with something sharp. "Do you know who he is?" Clinton held his breath for a moment before exhaling, slow and heavy. He couldn't lie. Not now. Not when his son was standing right in front of him. "Yes," he finally said. Landon's eyes widened. His breath hitched in his throat. Clinton swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet the boy's gaze. "I think," he paused, the weight of the words pressing down on him. "I think I'm your father." The room went still. Landon's face paled, his entire body frozen in place. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. His hands trembled. His eyes, so much like Clinton's own, were filled with shock, confusion, and something else, betrayal. The soup on the stove began to boil over, but neither of them moved. Because in that moment, nothing would ever be the same again. Landon's breath came in short, uneven gasps. The words had struck him like a thunderclap, shattering the thin layer of hope and detachment he had built around himself. "I think I'm your father." His knees felt weak. His fingers curled into fists at his sides as his mind raced to process what he had just heard. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. His father had never been part of his life. His mother had never mentioned him, never given him a name, never even hinted at who he was. And now, this man, this cold, wealthy stranger, was saying he was him. "No," Landon finally whispered, shaking his head. His voice was barely audible, but the sheer force of his denial made the word cut through the silence. Clinton Barlow watched him carefully, his face unreadable, but there was something strained in his eyes, something hesitant. "Landon," he began, but Landon stepped back abruptly, his movements jerky, as if his body was rejecting everything happening in that moment. "No," he said again, louder this time. His heart pounded against his ribs, his breath quickening. "You're lying." Clinton exhaled slowly, as if trying to steady himself. "I wouldn't lie about this." Landon's head spun. He felt like the room was closing in on him, like the air had been sucked out. His father. The man he had spent his entire life imagining, the man he had secretly wondered about when he lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, pretending he didn't care. The man who had never once come looking for him. His stomach twisted into a painful knot. "Where were you?" he demanded suddenly, his voice trembling with something raw. Anger. Pain. Betrayal. Clinton flinched. "I didn't know." "You didn't know." Landon let out a bitter laugh, but it was empty, hollow. His hands were shaking now, but he clenched them tight, refusing to let the man in front of him see his weakness. "You never even looked." Clinton ran a hand over his face, something resembling shame flickering across his features. "Your mother, she never told me. I had no idea she was pregnant." Landon stared at him, his pulse roaring in his ears. A part of him wanted to believe it. A small, desperate part of him wanted to cling to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't his fault. That maybe this man hadn't abandoned him on purpose. But then another thought crept in. If he had known, would he have cared? Landon's voice turned sharp. "And if she had told you? Would you have stayed?" Clinton didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. His blue eyes, Those same eyes Landon saw in the mirror every day, darkened with something unreadable. I don't know, he admitted finally. Landon's stomach dropped. His chest ached in a way that made it hard to breathe. He had spent years pretending it didn't matter. That he didn't need a father. That he was fine on his own. But hearing those words, hearing that even if Clinton had known, he wasn't sure if he would have chosen him, it made something inside him crack. He let out a shaky breath, stepping back toward the door. I shouldn't have come here. Clinton straightened, alarm flashing across his face. Landon, wait. No, Landon snapped, his voice breaking. I don't need anything from you. I don't need your food, your house, or your pity. You didn't want me then, and I don't want you now. He turned, his body moving on instinct, heading for the door. But before he could reach it, Clinton's voice stopped him. I made a mistake. Landon froze. His back was still turned, but his breathing was shaky, uneven. I was young, Clinton continued, his voice lower now, filled with something Landon didn't recognize. I was selfish. I wanted success more than anything, and I thought love, family, would only slow me down. I left your mother because I was too blind to see what really mattered. Landon's throat tightened. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to care. I can't change what I did, Clinton admitted. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I swear to you, if I had known. He stopped himself. A bitter chuckle escaped his lips as he shook his head. No. It doesn't matter what I would have done. What matters is what I do now. Landon turned, his eyes narrowed. And what is that supposed to mean? Clinton met his gaze, his expression steady. It means I don't want to lose you again. Landon's chest ached at the words. They were too big, too heavy, and part of him wanted to believe them, wanted to believe that he wasn't just a mistake, a forgotten secret buried in the past. But another part of him, the part that had spent too many nights alone, too many winters without warmth, didn't trust him. He let out a shaky breath, stepping back again. I don't know if I believe you, he admitted. Clinton's expression didn't waver. Then let me prove it. Landon hesitated, his pulse still racing. The front door was right there. He could leave. He could walk out, disappear back into the cold, pretend this never happened. Or he could stay. For just one more night. Fine, he muttered, his voice barely audible. Clinton didn't smile. He didn't look relieved. He just gave a slow nod, as if understanding that this wasn't a victory, just a chance. And as Landon sat back down at the table, staring at the now cooling bowl of soup, he felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. For the first time in his life, he had found his father. But he wasn't sure if that was a gift or a curse. Landon sat at the large dining table, staring down at the now lukewarm bowl of soup. The hunger in his stomach was still there, but his appetite had vanished. The weight of the revelation pressed down on him, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. Across the table, Clinton watched him in silence. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with questions neither of them knew how to ask. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, the only sound in the cavernous kitchen. Landon swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the spoon. He had spent years imagining what his father might be like, if he was kind, if he was cruel, if he had ever thought about him at all. But he had never imagined this. A rich man in a silk robe. A stranger with cold blue eyes that somehow mirrored his own. A man who had never even known he existed. Landon clenched his jaw. You really didn't know about me? He asked, his voice rough. Clinton sighed, rubbing his forehead. No, he said, his voice quieter now. Your mother, she never told me. Landon looked up sharply. Why? The question hung in the air. Clinton hesitated before answering. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe she didn't think I deserved to know. Maybe she thought I wouldn't care. He let out a heavy breath. And honestly, back then, she might have been right. Landon's chest tightened. The word stung in a way he hadn't expected. He wanted to be angry, to throw the bowl across the room and tell this man that he was right, he didn't deserve to know. But at the same time, a part of him ached to understand. "What happened between you two?" he asked, his voice softer now, despite himself. Clinton leaned back in his chair, his fingers lacing together. His expression darkened, his eyes growing distant, as if he was looking at something far away, something only he could see. "We were young," he started. "I was ambitious. Too ambitious. I wanted more than a small-town life. I wanted money, power, success." He exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening. Ellie, she wanted different things. She wanted a family, a home. She wanted me, but I was too blind to see that she was worth more than anything else I was chasing. He paused, as if collecting his thoughts, then shook his head. "I made a choice. I left. I told myself I would come back for her someday, when I had built something, when I had enough to give her. But by the time I looked back, she was gone." Landon stared at him, his fingers gripping the spoon so tightly his knuckles turned white. "She waited for you," he said quietly. Clinton's eyes snapped to his. "She waited for you," Landon repeated, his voice growing harsher. "For years." His breath hitched as he felt something rise in his throat, something too painful to swallow. "She never talked about you. But I could see it, every time she looked out the window like she was expecting someone who never came back." Clinton flinched, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. Landon pushed back his chair abruptly, standing up so fast it scraped against the floor. "She was alone," he said, his voice shaking. "We were alone." His fists clenched at his sides. "Do you have any idea what that was like?" Clinton's throat worked as he swallowed. "Landon. I don't care how much money you have," Landon snapped. "I don't care about your stupid house, or your business, or whatever made you think it was okay to just walk away." His breath came in sharp bursts, his heart hammering in his chest. "You left her. And you left me before you even knew I existed." Clinton stood now, his own expression tense. "I can't change that," he said, his voice firm. "I can't undo the past." Landon let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah. Well, neither can I." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater, the warmth of the house pressing against the cold that still clung to Landon's skin. Then Clinton sighed. He ran a hand down his face, looking more exhausted than Landon had ever seen him. "I know you don't trust me," he said finally. "And I don't expect you to. But I'm not going to let you walk out of here and disappear into the cold again." His gaze locked onto Landon's, steady and unyielding. "Not now. Not after this." Landon swallowed, his throat burning. A part of him wanted to argue, to tell him that it was too late, that he had already disappeared a long time ago. But another part of him, the part that had spent years being alone, was too tired to fight. Too tired to run. "Just for tonight," he muttered, looking away. Clinton didn't smile. He didn't act like he had one. He just nodded. Just for tonight. Landon didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, for the first time in his life, he wasn't out in the cold. Landon lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was too big, too warm, too quiet. He wasn't used to this kind of silence, the kind that came from thick walls and luxury, not from the emptiness of the streets. The sheets were soft, the mattress thick beneath him. He should have been comfortable, but he wasn't. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. His father. The word felt foreign in his head. Clinton Barlow was his father. The man he had imagined 1,000 different ways, some cruel, some kind, some faceless, was real. And he was just down the hall. Landon clenched his jaw, rolling onto his side. He had spent his whole life telling himself he didn't care about his father. That he didn't need him. That he was fine on his own. But now that he knew who he was, now that he was here, in his house, in one of his beds, wearing clothes that weren't his, it didn't feel fine at all. A quiet knock sounded at the door. Landon stiffened. He had barely spoken to Clinton after their argument at the table. He had eaten a little, showered, changed into the clothes Clinton had left for him, and then retreated here. He hadn't expected him to come after him. The door cracked open slightly, and Clinton's voice was cautious. "Still awake?" Landon hesitated before answering. "Yeah." There was a brief pause before Clinton stepped inside. He wasn't wearing the silk robe anymore, just a simple sweater and slacks, like he had changed into something less rich. Less imposing. He sat down in the chair by the desk, leaving plenty of space between them. He didn't push, didn't try to get closer. Landon watched him carefully, unsure of what to expect. Clinton exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I know this is a lot. And I know you probably don't want to hear anything from me right now." Landon didn't answer. He wasn't sure what he wanted. Clinton hesitated, as if weighing his words. "I meant what I said downstairs," he continued. "I don't expect you to trust me. And I know I don't deserve to ask anything from you." Landon sat up slightly, his arms wrapped around his knees. "Then why are you here?" Clinton let out a quiet chuckle, though it wasn't really amused. "Because I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this house." Landon's chest tightened. He wasn't sure why those words hit him so hard. Maybe because that was exactly how he felt. Alone. Even in this huge, warm, extravagant house, maybe even more so than he had outside. He swallowed hard. "I don't know what you want from me." Clinton leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I don't want anything from you, Landon." His voice was steady, but there was something raw in it, something honest. "I just want you to know, you don't have to run anymore." Landon's fingers curled into the blankets. His throat felt tight, his eyes burning with something he refused to acknowledge. He had always been running. From foster homes. From shelters. From the cold. From the truth. And now, for the first time, someone was telling him he didn't have to. Landon looked away, his voice quiet. "I don't know if I can just believe that." Clinton nodded, as if he understood. "Then I'll prove it to you." Landon's chest ached. He had no idea if Clinton meant that, if he could even keep a promise like that. But something about the way he said it made Landon pause. It didn't feel like just words. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clinton stood up. "Get some rest. We'll figure things out tomorrow." Landon didn't answer, but as Clinton reached the door, he finally spoke. "Good night." Clinton stopped. Then, with a small nod, he said, "Good night, Landon." The door closed behind him, and for the first time in a long time, Landon didn't feel completely alone. Landon woke up to the smell of coffee and something warm, buttery, and rich drifting through the air. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. The bed beneath him was too soft, the room too quiet. His body tensed, conditioned by years of waking up in unfamiliar places, shelters, park benches, abandoned buildings where he had to be ready to run at any moment. Then it hit him. Clinton Barlow's house. His father's house. Landon sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He had barely gotten any rest. His mind had been restless all night, running over every conversation, every revelation, every emotion he wasn't ready to deal with. He had been alone for so long, how was he supposed to just accept this? He pushed off the blankets and pulled on the clothes Clinton had given him. They were expensive, nicer than anything he'd ever owned, but they didn't feel like his. He still felt like an outsider in this house. Landon hesitated before stepping into the hallway. The air was warm, the distant clinking of dishes echoing from downstairs. He followed the sound, his stomach tightening, not from hunger, but from the weight of everything that had happened the night before. When he reached the kitchen, he froze. Clinton was standing by the stove, wearing a simple long-sleeve shirt and jeans, flipping something on a pan. A pot of coffee was brewing, and on the table, there was already a plate of toast, eggs, and bacon. Landon blinked, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The man was cooking. The same man who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and expensive restaurants was standing in his massive kitchen, making breakfast like this was just a normal morning. Clinton glanced over his shoulder and met Landon's surprised gaze. He smirked slightly. "Didn't think I could cook, huh?" Landon hesitated before answering. "Didn't think you'd have to." Clinton chuckled, flipping the pancakes. "Fair point. I usually don't. But I figured if I'm trying to be," he hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "If I'm trying to do this right, I should probably start with the basics." Landon crossed his arms, leaning against the doorway. "So, making pancakes fixes everything?" Clinton turned off the stove and set a plate of pancakes on the table. "No. But it's a start." Landon studied him for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Part of him wanted to reject this sudden attempt at normalcy. But another part of him, the one that had spent so many nights wishing for something as simple as a warm meal, wanted to sit down and eat. His stomach made the decision for him. Slowly, he stepped forward, pulling out a chair. Clinton didn't say anything, didn't push, just poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. Landon hesitated before picking up his fork. He took a bite of the pancake, expecting it to be bland or overcooked. Instead, it was warm, fluffy, and surprisingly good. He glanced up at Clinton, who raised an eyebrow. "Not bad, right?" Landon swallowed. "I've had worse." Clinton smirked. "I'll take that as a win." They ate in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. There was too much unsaid, too much lingering in the air between them. Finally, Clinton set down his coffee. "Landon, I know you don't trust me. And I don't blame you for that." Landon didn't respond. He just stared at his plate, waiting for whatever speech was coming next. "I can't change the past," Clinton continued. "I can't undo the mistakes I made. But I don't want to be another person who lets you down." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't know how to be a father. But I want to try." Landon's grip on his fork tightened. He wanted to believe him. He really did. But belief was dangerous. Belief got people hurt. "You say that now," Landon muttered, staring at the last piece of pancake on his plate. "But what happens when you get bored of this? When you realize I don't fit into your perfect life?" Clinton's jaw tensed. "That's not going to happen." Landon scoffed. "How do you know?" Clinton exhaled, pressing his fingers against the edge of the table. He was silent for a moment before he finally spoke. "Because I've spent my whole life chasing things that don't matter," he admitted. "And for the first time, I've found something that does." Landon's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what to say to that. So he didn't say anything. Instead, he picked up his fork and finished his last bite of pancake. And for now, that was enough. The days passed slowly, but something had shifted. Landon wasn't sure when it happened, maybe during the quiet breakfasts, maybe in the way Clinton never pushed him for anything, never demanded that he trust him, just let him be. It was strange, waking up in a warm house. Strange, having a bed, clothes that weren't falling apart, food waiting in the kitchen. He didn't know what to do with the unfamiliar sense of stability. It felt like something fragile, something that could disappear if he let himself get too comfortable. And yet, he didn't leave. Maybe he told himself it was just for the winter, just until he figured something else out. But deep down, a part of him wanted to stay. One evening, Clinton was sitting in his study, going through some business reports, when Landon wandered in. He hesitated in the doorway, unsure if he was welcome, but Clinton looked up and gestured to the chair across from him. Landon sat down, tapping his fingers against the wooden armrest. He didn't know why he was here, he just felt restless. "You're quiet tonight," Clinton noted. Landon shrugged. "Just thinking." Clinton set down his papers, giving Landon his full attention. "About what?" Landon hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about what was in his head. No one had ever cared enough to ask. Finally, he sighed. "I don't know how to do this." Clinton tilted his head slightly. "Do what?" Landon gestured vaguely around the room. "This. Having a place. Someone who," he cut himself off, frustrated. He didn't even know how to put it into words. Clinton leaned back in his chair, studying him. "I don't know how to do this either," he admitted. Landon looked at him in surprise. "You don't?" Clinton chuckled, shaking his head. "No. I've spent my entire life building businesses, making money, controlling everything around me. But being a father? That's new territory." He sighed. "And I know I've already messed up in ways I can't fix." Landon swallowed, staring at the floor. Clinton continued, his voice softer now. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying." Landon's chest tightened. He had spent so long convincing himself that he didn't need anyone, that he was better off alone. But here was this man, his father, saying he wasn't going anywhere. Landon took a slow breath, forcing himself to ask the question that had been lingering in his mind since that first night. "What if I'm not what you expected?" Clinton's expression didn't change. "You're not." Landon's stomach twisted, but before he could react, Clinton continued. "You're more than I expected," he said firmly. "And that's a good thing." Landon stared at him, his throat tightening. He wanted to believe him. He really did. But trust wasn't easy. And Clinton seemed to know that. So instead of forcing the moment, instead of trying to push something that wasn't ready, he simply said, "We take it one day at a time. No pressure. No expectations." Landon looked down at his hands, his fingers curling and uncurling. One day at a time. He could do that. After a long pause, he finally nodded. Clinton smiled, not a triumphant smile, not like he had won something, but a quiet, knowing smile. And for the first time, Landon felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. He still didn't know if this would last. But for the first time in his life, he was willing to try. This story is about more than just a lost boy and a wealthy man, it's about redemption, second chances, and the slow, painful process of healing. Landon and Clinton are two people shaped by the choices of the past, one abandoned and one too blind to see what truly mattered. Their journey isn't about fixing everything overnight or pretending that wounds don't exist. It's about choosing to stay. Landon spent his whole life believing that he didn't need anyone, that he was better off alone. Clinton, on the other hand, convinced himself that success was the only thing that mattered. But in the end, they both realized the same truth: having someone to come home to is more valuable than anything else. Their relationship is far from perfect. There's too much pain, too much history to ignore. But what makes this story meaningful is that they don't give up on each other. They choose to take it one step at a time, no pressure, no expectations, just the willingness to try. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start building something real.